Oh. Yeah. And you need to turn on these two displays.
You want to see if he wants to like go ahead? He seems to be ready already. I don't know if he wanted to. Should we?
Hero will present you, and then we'll determine the two songs.
Show him to him.
Two hymns.
Okay.
Then we'll transfer.
You have the phone? I have my phone. Yeah.
So just, I'm going to announce the questions I answer.
Okay.
That's fine.
It's not really like.
Just going to do a quick game and then we'll get started. Take your time. Take your time. And I'll give the prizes out.
Exactly.
Guys, do you want to take a seat? Take a seat, please. Take a seat. Okay, so we're about to get started. So as you guys can see on the screens, there is a QR code. So this is for questions. When you submit a question, it's anonymous. You'll be able to see all the questions that are submitted, but you won't be able to see who submitted them. So don't be afraid unless you supply your name. So if you see a question that someone else posted and you find it interesting, give it a like so George knows and we know that this is an interesting question. So if you don't want to put your name, it's no problem. It will be anonymous, but you'll be able to see all the questions. Okay? So we'll leave those on the screen. We're going to do a quick game, and we do have prizes. So Jonathan and Chris are going to do a game. We have gift cards to Starbucks. We have coupons to the bookstore. And we have some crosses and stuff. So, yeah, we'll get started.
Okay. Just gonna need everyone's attention quickly after you guys are done scanning the QR code. Pretty much how the game will work is that we're going to play a hymn, and the first person to raise their hand, correctly guess the hymn, and where we say the hymn, will receive the gift. So we're only gonna do 3. So if you can't hear it, let me know if there's any issues.
It's instrumental.
Yeah, so it's instrumental as well, so you can't just get the first word and cheat your way out of it. All right. I'll just need a little bit of silence back there. George? Bad choice. Okay. Oh, and if you answer once, you can't answer again. So keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. George, when do we say it? In the resurrection? When in the resurrection? Can we say it any other days? All right. All right, no worries. Don't do the next one. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So we're gonna do the next one. Oh, you have an answer? Pardon? No.
MV? Since an MV?
What was
Since
it?
an MV?
No. All right, we might have to move on to the next hymn. Oh, restart it? Okay. Oh, we got one answer. No, not being them, huh? Yeah, I'll play one. I'll keep playing it. Okay, everyone needs to be very quiet. All right, we got one more answer. Afrekit way, very good. Well done.
Frickin' V.
Afrekit way was the hymn.
Resurrection.
It's a. When do we say it? When do we say it? When do we say it? Yes. Ascension. Ascension. I was into this one. All right, for the last and final one, I think we should get a girl to answer this time. I want to go dance. Sorry, there's an ad. We're not on premium yet. There's another ad. There's double ads. Finish short. Very good. Well done, everybody.
Good job. Thank you, Jonathan. We'll do the one ternima and then we can go ahead with the session. Marina.
Yes. Where's Kira? Whoever is inside, we're gonna do Father God, I wonder. Father God, I wonder how I managed to exist without the knowledge of your parenthood and your loving care. But now I am your child, I am adopted in your family, and I will never be alone, 'cause Father God, you're there beside me. I will sing your praises, I will sing your praises, I will sing your praises forevermore. I will sing your praises, I will sing your praises, I will sing your praises forevermore. I will sing your praises, I will sing your praises, I will sing your praises forevermore.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen.
While I get connected, can we do a quick review, quick recap of, 1 second. Can we do a quick review of what we have been discussing this morning? Raise your hand and tell me what resonated with you the most. Aha moment. Yes, sir. Okay, good. It hit me too, in a different way. Yes, thank you. What else? Yes. Beautiful. It takes more faith to be an atheist than to be a believer in God. What else? Oops. How to's. Well, you're doing a quick review as I do this. What else? Anyone? Here's the review, mandatory review. I know we didn't cover this, but. All right, what else? A couple more. Yes, Marianne.
That like something outside of time, space, and matter must have created it, and so the explanation of God doesn't seem so far away.
Perfect. Perfect. Timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and remember the other three? Omnipotent, omniscient, and person. Reasonable person. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
You have to start
Yes,
by going into
perfect. Start by jumping into the deep and then swim to the edges of your faith. Excellent. All right, I want to share with us, continue on with the same theme. And then the third session will be the meaning of life. So the third session will speak to the heart. The first and second speak to the mind, and we'll get to the heart when we go to the meaning of life. I want to share with you what Herbert Spencer in 1903, he was a disciple of Charles Darwin, an atheist and evolutionist. He made a very profound scientific statement, and he spent most of his life trying to come up with the answer to this statement. He said, everything in the universe can be explained by 5 basic principles or 5 basic things: space, matter, time, force, and action. He said, everything in this universe can be explained by those 5 basic things. Now, and he couldn't find the answer to these 5 basic things. If Spencer would have opened the scriptures, the first verse of the first chapter of the first book in the scriptures give the answer to these 5 basic things. So in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, that's time. God, that's your force. Created, that's the action. The heavens, that's your space. And the earth, that's your matter. So what Herbert Spencer was trying to come up with is explained in the very first verse of the scriptures. Space, time, force, action, and matter. I'm not going to go over Pascal's wager because I think all of you went over this. Correct? This was part of the workshop. So I'll skip Pascal's wager. Can I briefly? ماشي. حاضر. Y'all know Pascal? Do y'all know Pascal? Y'all. Do y'all know Pascal? He was a French scientist, and he argued the existence of God in terms of a wager, bet, rahan, okay? And he based his wager on the following premise, that a normal, rational, sane person, when given 2 possible choices, they will choose that choice which will give them the highest possible reward, which is very intuitive. If you're investing, let's say, in the stock market or whatever, you invest in that which will give you the highest possible return or reward. And this is Pascal's wager in just one page. Let's go over it briefly. You have two choices and two options. The two choices are subjective. They depend on you, the subject. You either believe in God or you don't believe in God. Do you have any third choice? This is called the law of excluded middle. There's nothing in between. You either believe or you don't believe. These are your choices. What are your options? Either God exists or God doesn't exist. Do you have any third option? No, he either exists or doesn't. Options, choices. These are subjective. These are objective. They depend on the object. And these depend on the subject. Now, Pascal looked at this and said, which one of these four quadrants will give me the highest possible reward? Let's look at each one of them. Let's say you believe in God. That's your choice. And what ended up happening is that God doesn't exist. Like all of us are believers, and at the end, God doesn't exist. What is the result? Finite loss. What does it mean? What's the finite loss? Well, finite because there's nothing beyond this universe, because God doesn't exist. Life is all there is here. Why the loss? Because you had to fast 200 plus days of the year. You had to go to Bible studies. You had to go to church. You had to wake up early on Sunday. You had to read the Bible. You had to do 400 matanyas on Good Friday. All of these things you had to do. That's loss. And there's nothing. God doesn't exist. That's according to Pascal. Second option. I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. And God doesn't exist. What's the result? Finite gain. What did I gain? According to Pascal, I lived my life however I wanted to live it. However I wanted to live my life. بالعربي عيش حياتك. Just do whatever you want to do. Go out, party, have fun, and do whatever. No church. Enjoy your life. Finite gain. Why finite? Because there's nothing beyond God. Nothing beyond this universe. Third option. I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. And God exists. What is the result? Well, I'll have the finite gain. I lived my life on earth however I wanted to live it, but I will have also infinite loss because God exists, and I will infinitely be away from eternal bliss and joy and presence with God. Pascal is assuming that this God is the God of the scriptures, by the way. I needed to say that in the beginning. Okay? طيب. I believe in, fourth option, I believe in God. And God does exist. What's the result? I will have finite loss, all the things Christians do, but I will have infinite gain. What's the infinite gain? I will live with God in eternity in His kingdom, in eternal joy. So Pascal looked at this and said, where should I bet my life on? Or what should I bet my life on? That which will give me the highest reward. Which quadrant do you think will give you the highest reward? Obviously, the one that will give you infinite gain. I'll suffer the loss, but I want to get the infinite gain. So Pascal said, I'm going to live my life as if God exists. I believe in Him. And there comes the greatest mystery of all. What Pascal thought was finite loss ended up being finite gain. So he had actually gained heaven and earth. Just like the Lord Jesus Christ when He said, seek first the kingdom of heaven, and everything will be added فوق البيعة to you. C.S. Lewis said it as well in a different way. C.S. Lewis, the Christian apologist and author, he said, aim for heaven, you will get earth thrown in. But if you aim for earth, you'll get neither heaven nor earth. You see? Aim for heaven, you'll get earth thrown in. But if you aim for earth, you'll get neither heaven nor earth. So Pascal said, I am going to bet my life on this quadrant, and became one of the most famous apologist Christian authors, Christian theologians of his time. I summarize it with the following statement. I say, I would rather live my life as if there is a God and die to find out there isn't, than to live my life as if there isn't a God and die to find out there is. It's just logic and reason. But why wouldn't you bet your life on this quadrant? Maybe because there are other reasons why you don't want to believe in the existence of God, and that's what we will discuss next. Any comments on this? This was supposed to be brief, but it wasn't brief. Malish. Comments on this? Yes, Habibi. It doesn't make sense? It makes sense. I love your comments. Keep these comments coming. Thank you. Any other comments?
ان ده بيبقى ممكن نصنفه ايمان ضعيف. يعني انا ما ينفعش ابني ايماني لاحسن يطلع فيه ربنا، المفروض ابقى واقف على بيز اقوى من كده.
Good point, and I should have mentioned that this is not an argument for God's existence. This is not an argument for faith. Don't look at Pascal's wager from a Coptic Orthodox Christian perspective. That's not my intention at all. Keep in mind, Pascal was an atheist, and this was his entry point to the existence of God and faith and worship and all the other stuff. This was more like the initial contact with reason. You don't build your faith on, hypothetically speaking, maybe God does exist, maybe he doesn't. That's not what we believe in. We as Christians don't need Pascal's wager, because I have a relationship with this God. مش هتيجي دلوقتي تقول لي maybe yes, maybe no. I have a relationship, but from an atheist perspective, there's no such a thing. So that was more his reasoning. Does that make sense? Good point, though. I'll share with you something else. I call it the duality of this world. يعني ايه duality of this world? This world seems to be a bipolar world, a schizophrenic world that we live in. I'll explain. How do you feel when you see something like this, a beautiful sunset? What are the sentiments? What does this evoke within you? Feelings of what? Peace, tranquility, joy, wow, awe, nice, all of these wonderful things. مش كده؟ طيب, what about this? Destruction, earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, all of that. No, that's not. What does this evoke with sentiments? Agony, distress, anger, misery, all of the above. It seems that this world gives you these moments followed by these moments, much like moments of joy and laughter followed by moments of tears and crying and sadness. Strength of the youth followed by frailty and weakness of the elders. Nice dreams followed by nightmares. It seems that this world gives you with one hand only to take with the other hand. Here's the question. Think philosophically now. Here's the question. Why does the world seem to give with one hand only to take away with the other? More importantly, why is it that we cannot reconcile ourselves to this duality of this world, but rather long for complete harmony and joy? If we as atheists claim are products of this universe, we should be totally fine when we see people dying, earthquakes and killings and all of that. That's just the world. That's just the world we live in. We're furnitures, we're ingredients in this universe, and we shouldn't complain. Something in us complains. Something in us is at unrest when you see the destruction of this world. Let me illustrate with this example. And I've asked this question to some atheists in the past. Have you seen a fish in a fish bowl before? Yes, you have, many times. Now, let's just assume, for the sake of this illustration, that the fish can speak. Do you think the fish will ever complain of being wet? No. Why? Because it's meant to live in water. Let's assume, for the sake of this illustration, that the fish is complaining and wants to get out of this water. I don't want to be wet. Wouldn't that be the greatest indicator that this fish is meant to live on dry land? Likewise, when we complain of all the misery, destruction, agony, evil, suffering of this world, wouldn't that be the greatest indicator that we're meant to live in a different world where there's total harmony, peace, and joy? Yes, that's the kingdom of heaven that Christ is coming to give you and I. The world with total harmony, total peace, total joy. There is an innate desire to live in this world that this earth cannot provide. Do you see? Again, that's an existential argument that there is a world out there that exists where I can be totally joyful, totally at peace, totally in harmony with myself and others. It's the world that is promised to us. And Abuna prays in the commemoration prayer, and he says what? This world out of which fled الذي هرب منه حزن والكآبة والتنهد, out of which fled all these miseries, because it's all joy and harmony, and that's the world we desire. Any comments on this? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Yes.
I can't remember, but kind of like if, I don't know, it's probably C.S. Lewis, but something about like, then we must have been meant for something else. Like,
My version of the argument from desire. It's called The Argument from Desire by C.S. Lewis. So I took it and created my own. I plagiarized a little bit, but I created my own argument with it. All right, here's the question I want to ask you, or I want to share with you. That's in his book. Have you ever had some atheists, those who don't believe in God, that tell you, hey, I'm happy. Don't shove your God down my throat. Don't force me to be a believer or a Christian. I'm just happy the way I am. I have my family, my house, my job, my cars, my this, my that. Don't bother. Have you had people like that? I have met many people like that. What do? You just leave them alone? Of course, leave them alone. Pray for them. But I want you to rest assured that these words are not coming from their heart. These words are only coming from their lips, their mouth. And I'll prove it to you. I'll share with you 6 or 7 quotes of very famous atheists, who, in the moment of truth, when is that moment of truth? On their deathbed, when they're dying, what they said about their atheism. Very interesting to see that they're dying now. They cannot live a lie anymore. They're face to face with the truth. What did they say when they were dying on their deathbed as atheists? Let me share with you some, not all of them, just some of them. Jean-Paul Sartre is a very famous atheist, existentialist, French. He admitted his need for God. This is what he said. By the way, the references are down here if you want to look at the references. I needed God. I reached out for religion. I longed for it. It was the remedy. Had it been denied me, I would have invented it myself. I would have invented religion myself. Albert Camus, who's also a French existentialist, he said, for anyone who's alone without God and without a master, the weight of days is dreadful. Bertrand Russell, famous agnostic atheist, he said, something in one seems to belong to God. I care passionately for this world and many things and people in it. And yet, what is it all? There must be something more important, one feels, though I don't believe there is. Erich Fromm, the famous psychologist, said, the need for an object of devotion is deeply rooted in the conditions of human existence. Finally, Sigmund Freud, the famous psychologist, said, it would be very nice if there were a God who created the world and a moral order in the universe and an afterlife. So all of these people deny God with the top of their minds, but they cannot avoid him in the bottom of their hearts. They can deny God all they want with the top of their minds, but cannot deny him with the bottom of their hearts. This is what St. Augustine said in his Confessions. He said, you have created us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts will remain restless until they find their rest in you. And St. John Chrysostom said, God has placed the knowledge of himself in human hearts from the beginning. And Solomon said in Ecclesiastes, في سفر الجامعة, chapter 3, verse 11, he said, God has placed what in our hearts? You said it, I heard it. Eternity, beautiful. God has placed eternity in our heart. We will always have this God-shaped void in our heart that this world will never satisfy. Comments on this? This was supposed to be a discussion, but it turned out to be a lecture. Forgive me. Yes, Matthew, Habib.
Like having, some example of people on their deathbed that, thought otherwise or claim that they didn't truly believe it, like in atheism. But like those ones had examples where they said, no, there must have been something else, and they admitted to that. But there must be a lot of other ones that, they didn't. And I think, like, what comes to mind is, in your story earlier where you're like, okay, if I prove this to you, or if I answer you these questions, are you going to believe? And they just said no. So that other reason, like, how do you mix that with, like, don't argue with fools? And so it's, when you have those ones where it's like, there's nothing you can say to them that will convince them otherwise.
I meet a lot of people like that, and you just pray for them. That's it. You're not going to twist their arms. God is not going to twist their arms. God is going to say, some people think that if I reject God, God is going to say, well, if you rejected me, you're going to go to hell. That's not how God works. If you reject him, he will continue until your last breath, run after you. He's going to give you a message this way, a message that way. You know why? Because he died for you. You're precious in his eyes. You are in his image. To us, we think that, you know what? You brought it unto yourself. That's not how God works. He's far more compassionate and merciful. But if you continue to reject him, he's not going to twist your arms and say, you're going to come with me to paradise whether you like it or not. Because for those who continue to reject God, if God were to send them to heaven, this heaven would be hell for them. I don't want to be there. So C.S. Lewis said it also. I'm a big fan of C.S. Lewis. He said, at the end, there will be two types of people. Those who have said to God all along, thy will be done. And those to whom God will say at the end, thy will be done. You see? I say this. All those who are in hell will be singing Frank Sinatra's song. I did it my way. not God's way. So the question now is, why not believe? And I think that's a good segue to this. With all this evidence, طيب يعني it seems that it's easy to believe in God with all the evidence that I shared with you. Why not believe? Why do you think? Now a question for you. You tell me. I'll take a break. Why do people continue to reject God? Yes. Hold on. Saying so.
There's always this fear from Christians where it's like, oh, they're homophobic, especially with the what we support right now with the whole gay, lesbian, stuff like that. It could be like they don't want that self-image from themselves, like I don't support this, I don't support that, but deep down inside they could need God, right? Like I was even thinking when we were talking about the atheists, like I can't imagine needing something, right, and not being able to ask anybody. Personally, when I'm in a time of need, I ask God, I pray. But for atheists, that's not the case. So they might really need God. They might have the proof to believe in God, but they can't, because they might care about their image to other people more than they care about their image to themselves or towards God.
Excellent point. So your image, the environment, the culture you live in may suppress you from or deter you from wanting to proclaim your faith. Yes, very good point. Why else do people, despite the evidence, reject God? Excellent.
Anger to God, anger at God, trauma, something where they're in denial. They just don't want to because of
An event, some... Yeah. Excellent. Yes.
Because then you'd have to admit that not everything is within human control, that there are things that are unexplainable, and there's things that you have to trust that you don't have the answers, and you have to seek out an answer from God, but not always the answer is clear.
I love it. I love what you said. Because once you believe in God, you relinquish your control and authority over everything. And that's very difficult for someone who's proud. Yes?
Also, like you said before, some people perceive that there's finite gain if they don't believe in God.
Say that again.
Some people perceive that there's finite gain if they don't believe in God.
Excellent. Yes, because they have to give up things, their lifestyle has to change, and they have to give up a few things, and they want to enjoy the world. Excellent. Why else? People, go ahead, reject God.
I just wanted to go back to Pascal's wager. With that argument, are you assuming that like the human making that wager is a rational human being? Like I'm asking you.
Yes, that's what he said.
So couldn't you make the argument that humans by themselves aren't rational, so they wouldn't, even given all this evidence, they wouldn't choose the rational decision?
Yeah, but I would argue that, well, I would ask you first, what is a human? A creation in God's image and likeness. I mean, that's what we believe in. Now, what does that mean in his image and likeness? Implied, implicit in image and likeness is reason. So we are rational, reasonable beings that have the capacity of the cognitive capacity to reason, because we're created in the image of a reasonable God. Where did the laws of reason come from? That made you ask me this question. Again, you ask yourself, how did I reason to ask this question? It is a gift that's given to you. So if you use it according to the essence of this gift, you'll arrive at the existence of God. You don't believe that?
No.
Makes sense.
I would say like a not rational human being would be a reason as to why you wouldn't believe in God.
That's true.
Right.
Because reason points to the existence of God. That's why when I asked the atheists who came to me and I said, where did your mind come from? Because that's reason. You can actually, there's an argument, one of the 20 arguments I mentioned earlier. There's an argument called the argument from reason and logic. How can time plus matter plus chance give me the properties of reason? Because according to atheism, I'm not saying this, atheists do say this. You and I are moist robots. That's the expression they have for you and I. We're robots. We're molecules in motion. That's another expression. So we're basically programmed to speak, act according to the nature and what our makeup, which is chemistry, biology, and physics. Where did reason come from? They don't believe in reason. They don't believe in a mind. We're just programmed. That's why they don't believe in free will. They believe in determinism. We're just determined to say these things and act this way. That's on atheism. But on theism, no, we've been endowed with the capacity to reason. Does that make sense? Yes, Clara.
Yes. Some atheists feel like they're too far gone to be redeemed.
I can't hear you.
Some people who are atheists but they're good at heart feel like they're too far gone to be redeemed. Like, Hagi Kinisa, like,
yes.
Is there a chance for me? Like, I've been told by someone who was born a Christian that no longer comes to church, oh, if I step into the church, like, will I burn? And like, they said it as a joke, but it came from a genuine place. They feel like they're not worthy anymore, or they possibly fit into the society.
Then they don't know what Christianity is all about. In our Christian vocabulary, ما فيش حاجة اسمها too far to be redeemed. It doesn't exist. What is the best example we have? Can someone tell me? Exactly. The thief with the Lord Jesus Christ. I think he was too far to be redeemed if you would look at his biography. His last second, Abuna Dawood Lem'i said something beautiful and I would like to repeat. He said, ربنا بيتلكك علشان يدخلنا معاه السماء. You know what بيتلكك means? He just wants to find an excuse for you and me to enter with him into the kingdom of heaven. So there's no such a thing as being far. As a matter of fact, the further you are, maybe the softer your heart will become if you still want to find the truth yourself. He wants all to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. This is what he said. So here's a principle, qa'da. As long as we have Christ, there is hope. These two will go hand in hand. As long as we have Christ, there is hope. So never, ever lose hope, even in your last breath on your deathbed. All right. Sure.
So far from the church, it's also like, what does church mean to them? It's like implying like, I'm so far from all the relationships that I've foregone in the past that for me to come back to that would be so difficult. The people, like to kind of get back in touch with them, come back to the church, reface my fears that like I've broken all of these relationships. What are they going to think of me? How can we kind of instigating to understand more like what's their struggle? Like what are they feeling when they're saying that? Like to kind of feel what they're feeling and what the barrier is and how to ease that. I don't know, how can we like sometimes help with that?
That's a great question. It's a pastoral question, but that's a case-by-case kind of situation. What I gave Clara was more generally speaking, but then you have to look at this particular person you were referring to, or if there's a hypothetical person out there, you'll need to know exactly what is it, what's the issue, what's the challenge, what's the barrier to come back to the Lord. People in the church, a servant, a aunt, an uncle, a youth, so you have to be specific with what that is. That's a pastoral question. And this is service. That's the heart of the service. You had a question?
I think on the conversation of why don't people believe?
Yes.
I think for a lot of people, their perception of Christianity is like a
Yes.
big factor into that. They perceive Christianity as like a faith, like that hates a lot of certain groups, you know, but you know, there needs to be the reminder that the center of Christianity is fundamentally love, right? So I think a lot of people, when they come to me and they hear that I'm Christian, they have all these preconceptions that I think based on their own experiences or maybe what they've heard is just simply not true. And I think that's a big barrier on why they don't believe.
Excellent, beautifully said. I'm so glad you said that. Now, what do we do? I agree with you 100%. We're labeled all kind of stuff by society. What do we do?
Love.
True. And what else? If Christianity has this bad image, what must we do?
I guess, like, be that light on the hill, show them who we really are.
Exactly. Show them what the real image of Christianity is. Christ, who's the most loving, most tolerant, most compassionate, most accepting, and all of that. It's upon us, yes.
On the question of why not believe, I guess, like, I've heard you refer to it like people at their final breath, if they believe in God, they'll go to heaven. So maybe that they don't want to spend their life believing and preaching God and going to church and practicing their faith, because there's like almost a safety net at the end of your life. If you just say that you believe, then you'll be welcomed into the kingdom of heaven. So they kind of want the best of both worlds.
Yeah. That's a good point. But let me tell you this. Do you know when that last breath will be? I don't know. That could be today, it could be now, it could be tomorrow. You don't know. So that's number one. Number two, what kind of relationship with God do you have when you tell him, hey, listen, I'm going to be away from you all my life. Towards the end, I'll just, say a few words just to come and have, a relationship with you. You know what that kind of relationship, what kind of relationship this is? It's a relationship between a master and a slave. But that's not the relationship we have with God. Father and child, that's the relationship. And for my father, I don't want to be away from him all my life. And at the very end say, okay, can you just give me some inheritance even though I was away from you? That's like wanting to have the cake and eating it too. But that's not how Christianity works. Because Christianity is a relationship with Christ. Not just, I love you because I want something from you. I love your questions. Yes, Mary.
I was just going to say maybe that question stems from Pascal's wager, but if we look at it from a Christian perspective, like it's assuming that we're going to lose something, but even God says, like, come and the rest will be added onto you. You'll find peace, you'll find peace of mind, you'll find refuge. Like, so there is a gain that we really miss out on if we're not. There's an experiential element that.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, because even if you don't want to be with God all your life and just come to him at the very last moment, you would be the one who would be missing out on a lot of things. Because this world will never satisfy. We'll talk about this in the third session when we talk about the meaning of life. Any other comments on this? Now we're almost done.
الأمثلة اللي حضرتك ذكرتها غيرت إيمانها on their deathbed. أنا ما أظنش كده، يعني هم بيقولوا كنت أتمنى يبقى في God فعلا، لكن هم ماتوا ملحدين برضو، صح؟
See, I'm not saying in هم on their deathbed they became Christians. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying they realized إن في حاجة ناقصة. That's all I wanted to share with you. And they came to this realization. So why do I have to live a lie all my life and come to this realization on my deathbed? And many, by the way, became also believers on their deathbed. Some, but that's many, some that I know. But the ones I mentioned, Bertrand Russell, if you look at the story of how Bertrand Russell, the famous agnostic, how he died with his fist aimed towards heaven and saying, you did not give me enough evidence that you existed, and he was very angry at God and died. So, ليه بقى ما هو that's the question. ليه هنجاوب عليها in 2 minutes. Yes, Mary.
Because I just want to see if this is relatable to people, because maybe we talk about it like I believe in God or I don't, but maybe amongst us there's that, like we all feel like I believe in God but help my unbelief. Like maybe it's a bit of a spectrum And I wonder where, I mean, they don't have to answer out loud, but maybe it's not so much like in the church and outside of the church. Maybe even we struggle with belief sometimes.
100%. And that's it. Mariana, when you said, I want to strengthen my faith and I can do it on my own. God, help me have this strong faith in you. Yeah, so I think all of this is enveloped with the grace of God. All of this is enveloped with the grace of God. So why not believe? I'll share with you a few slides and we're done. Mortimer Adler, he's a former atheist. He said, the answer to this question lies in the state of one's will, not in the state of one's mind. I will explain. One of my favorite quotes, truly one of my favorite quotes, by Wahid Ismu J. Budd, a former atheist. In The Revenge of the Conscience, he said the following. Listen carefully to what he said. He said, because the presence of God made me more and more uncomfortable when I was an atheist, I began looking for reasons to believe that he didn't exist. Now listen carefully. Not many of us doubt God's existence and then start sinning. Most of us sin first and then start doubting God's existence. And I think it's beautifully said, and it's true, 100%. Not many of us doubt God's existence and then start sinning. Most of us sin and then start doubting God's existence. The Lord Jesus Christ said that in John 3:19. He said, this is the condemnation, that the light has come into the world, and men loved darkness rather than the light. Why? وَأَحَبَّ النَّاسِ الظُّلْمَ أَكْثَرْ مِنَ النُّورِ. ليه؟ مين اللي قال؟ بالظبط كده. Because their deeds were evil. See how we know all the verses in Arabic? Because their deeds were, he didn't say because, they did not comprehend it, or because they had other reasons, because there was an event in their life. True, all of this is true, but primarily because their deeds were evil. What happens when the light comes to you? It exposes you. And I give this example before. Let's say I'm in my room and I'm doing something bad, whatever that is. And it's dark, nobody sees me. Someone comes and then turns on the light. I am now what? Exposed. So I have one or two options. Either come to the light or just get up and turn the light off. And that's sometimes what we do. We don't want the light because it exposes us. But that's not what Christ is saying. Christ is saying, come to the light so that you can become light unto others. This is the best picture I have for atheism. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory. All right. I think we're all atheismed out. مش كده? So now it's your time. Do you have any comments, questions, objections, anything? It's your time. Yes, sir. بالعربي؟ انت هتخليني تضحك عليا دلوقتي. اوكي. ماشي. I have to ما اقدرش اعمل سويتش مره واحده كده. اوكي. انا كنت بتكلم عن ايه؟ عن ان لو في سمكه بتتكلم، لو السمكه نفترض ان هي بتتكلم في حوض الميه، تفتكر ان السمكه هتقول انا زعلانه عشان مبلوله؟ لا، لان السمكه مفروض ان هي مخلوقه عشان تعيش في الميه. طب لو افترضنا ان السمكه قالت انا مش عاوز اتبل من الميه دي، لو تنفترض يعني، مش ده هو يكون اكبر دليل ان السمكه مفروض تكون تعيش على الارض؟ مش كده؟ نفس الموضوع. لو احنا بنتذمر على الكوارث والحوادث والحاجات اللي بتحصل في العالم اللي احنا عايشين فيه، والملحدين بيقولوا ان احنا من العالم، فمفروض ما نتذمرش على الحاجات دي. بس لو احنا في داخلنا بنتذمر على الحاجات دي ونحن بنشتاق إلى حياة جميلة حلوة فيها محبة وفرح وسلام والحاجات دي كلها. زي السمكة اللي قالت إيه أنا مش عاوز أعيش في المية، ده هيكون أكبر دليل إن هي المفروض تعيش على الأرض. إحنا برضو لما بنتذمر ومش عاوزين نعيش في العالم اللي مليان كوارث دي، أكبر دليل إن في عالم آخر مستنينا وهو ملكوت السماوات. You're very welcome. All right. Any comments or questions? Yes, تفضلي, and then after you. تفضلي.
All right. So, two comments. From what I've seen from atheists, so one of them, for example, he was so traumatized from the church servants, priests, and like from inside the church. He was so much traumatized during his childhood. That's why growing up, just give up everything about Christianity. He doesn't want to hear from God. So this one case. Another case, a neuroscientist struggling a lot with suffering babies in the hospitals and so much pain and so much death for innocent creatures. Like they didn't do anything, just born with many diseases, complications, and they die. So she's suffering from, or struggling with, God is not that good. So she gave up Bardo, the presence of God. So how do we address these two?
Excellent. Excellent. Two very good questions. The first scenario, if I have a youth yani who's away from the church because they في عثرة, between a servant or a priest, the only way to correct this is to have an open arm, compassionate servant and priest to undo what was done to him. That's the only way that can be fixed. Nothing will fix because you have to undo it. You see? So introduce him or her to a servant that can يحتويه ويحتضنه and so on and so forth. And a priest that can do that. That's number one. Number two, the second question is that this youth believes that they reject God because they see all the evil in this world and the babies suffering and all of that. They assume that they know what God should have been doing. So they are actually thinking they're playing God themselves. They don't know the finitude of their knowledge. They need to realize that they are limited as to what they know, and they need to realize that God is in control and He knows everything more than I do. Something that would be helpful for someone like that is the book of Job, Ayub. And you can tell him or her that Job had the same problem. He was saying, why God, why God, why God, why God? For 38 chapters, he was saying, why? But then God told him, He asked him 66 questions. Where were you when I did this? Where were you when I عملت كده? Where were you? كنت فين? So what did Job realize? That he is God and Job is not God. He realized one very important truth, and I say this to all the youth. The most supreme knowledge we should have is the knowledge of our ignorance. We don't know everything, but sometimes we think we know, but we don't. So we need to humble ourselves and realize a few things. First of all, God knows everything. Second of all, God has my best interest in mind. Third of all, God is more compassionate on these kids that suffer than she is or he is. She thinks بقى لا I have فين God اللي سايبهم ده مش موجود. No, حبيبتي, he is more compassionate on them than you are. Into you think and into you know, he knows better. And I have experiences to tell you these things. And I have one last thing I share with you. I say this. If God were to give me his power for 24 hours, just give me your power for 24 hours. You see how many things I will change in this world. But if he gives me his knowledge too, I will leave everything as is. Think about that for a minute. If God were to give me his power for 24 hours, you see how many things I will change. But if he gives me his knowledge too, I will leave everything as is. The problem is, we don't have his knowledge. St. Paul says, how unsearchable are your ways. ما أبعد أحكامه عن الاستقصاء or something like that. الفحص. So it's a perspective. You need to change that perspective to know who God is and how he deals with all of these people. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to us because we are believers, but whenever arguing with like neuroscientist or surgeon or dealing with death and life every day and believing that he's giving life to people whenever he rescues them and there is like no God in control, or another one like researching everything and like putting everything into like theories, it's very hard to convince them that God knows better. It was my answer.
Sure.
God knows better. We don't know why pain
Sure.
is happening, but they were not that convinced.
Now, two things. For a neuroscientist, I'm actually surprised because if you're a neuroscientist, there are 1,000 reasons to believe in God and one reason to doubt Him. So you leave the 1,000 and you look at the one, there's another problem. Because just to see how the brain works, if you don't believe in a creator of this mind as a neuroscientist, there's another problem. That's number one. Number two, you don't convince people to believe in God. You can't convince. I know what you meant, but I just want to highlight this. Apologetics, evangelism, all of that is not to convince people. You are just basically showing them that God exists. The only one who convinces is the Holy Spirit. Your words don't convince, they just prepare the way for the Holy Spirit to work. But if I am closing my heart and my mind, well, the Holy Spirit مش يقتحمه. So number one, there's another reason other than I give them life. As a neuroscientist, I'm surprised. Any other comments or questions? Matthew? I am not a neuroscientist. I am not a scientist at all. I do philosophy. Much more complicated, philosophy and psychology. But I know physicians that study the brain and neuroscience and cardiology and optometry and all of that. And most physicians, بلاش most. If you study the human physiology, you'll have to ask yourself, this could not have just come by chance. So, yes.
I think that last point is very important, where our role is to understand and strengthen our faith to be able to defend our faith. And when it comes to atheism, I think we try to answer it the same way we would with another religion. So if you have Islam or Buddhism or whatever, it's easy to understand what their religion is, and then we can, and then you can have that discussion about it because you understand what they believe in. With atheism, we can't bundle them all into you believe that it's predetermined or you believe that what, because everyone, like anyone who's atheist, can believe a very different set of things. They don't have a defined, like there's no court, like there's no manual of atheism, right? So you don't follow a certain structure, it's chaos. You can believe whatever you believe, as long as you just believe that there is no God, and that, but then anything in between, you can believe whatever you want, as opposed to another religion that's structured.
And for atheists, this triggered a point in my mind. For atheists, there are usually three reasons. Why not believe is for everyone, but for atheists especially, there are three reasons and only three. What are we made up of? The human soul is made up of three faculties: the mind, the heart, and what else? العقل والقلب والإرادة. The will. The mind, which is the seat of the intellect. The heart, which is the seat of the emotions. And the will is the seat of your behavior and your conduct. That's what we're made up of. If you deny God, it's one of those three reasons. You deny Him with your mind because you're a scientist and you've read so many books and you believe that you know everything. God cannot fit in your brain. That's, St. Augustine was like that, by the way, before he becomes St. Augustine. He wanted to put God in his mind. The other reason, your heart, emotions. I'm angry at God. أنا زعلان من ربنا علشان سايب زي الاكزامبل اللي حضرتك قلتيه. Actually انت قلتي الاثنين دلوقتي. Okay? ان ربنا سايب الشر في العالم. And God is doing this. Have you guys watched the movie God is Not Dead? You've watched that? That's precisely. That's the second reason. I am angry at God. The third reason اللي كنت بتكلم عليه ان انا I don't want God to exist عشان عاوز اعيش حياتي بالطول وبالعرض. So, for a wise Christian, to your point, Matthew, I need to know which one of these. If I have a problem intellectually and I'm speaking to you about emotional things, this is a straw man fallacy. I'm not fixing the problem. And if I'm angry at God, ما تدينيش بقى وعظات وphilosophy. فاهمين قصدي? So you need to know what is the real barrier. How do I know that? By two things. By making a connection with them and asking questions. Don't preach, God bless you. Don't preach. Don't sermonize. Don't philosophize. Ask questions. Make connections with them. Gain their trust. Gain their credibility. You will know what the problem is. Ask God to help you fix that problem. But there are three reasons you need to know which one of them. Does that answer your question? Does it answer your question? Okay. I think we're done. So, طب سريع بسرعة. Maybe afterwards, one-on-one, okay? Thank you so much.
Hey, George. Thank you, George. So we'll just break into groups again for this workshop, and then we can probably ask George as well more questions. So let's get back to our groups, same groups. Maral, where's Maral? Awesome. Yes, Ramez. We got Michael. Michael Malik is back. Yes. Big round of applause for Michael. So Michael is on this side.
We're switching.
So he's going to replace Marianne. On this side.
We're going to
So the question
so
is,
we can switch like.
have you encountered an atheist arguments, and how would you have responded in the past versus now? Okay. Have you encountered an atheist arguments, and how would you have responded in the past versus now after this talk? So mention 3 learnings, maybe 1 to 3 learnings, and then we can hear from each group. Okay. If we can be quick with this workshop, because then that's going to separate us from having lunch.
We were with.
Okay. So.
Hello. Echo.
I know I haven't seen her. طب سين معاكي بالمرة. Hi everyone. Miss you. How are you doing?
Okay, we're ready? Good, good. Okay. You guys are ready? Yeah? Yeah? You're good? Okay. We'll start with the same order. Go ahead, Ramaz. Do you have a mic?
So the question is, have you encountered an atheist's arguments, and how would you respond in the past versus now? So some of the things we talked about is, trying to figure out where that atheist is coming from, and whether it's the mind, the will, or the soul. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Some of the things we talked about is trying to resonate, trying to understand where the atheist is coming from, and what has caused them to be in that state, whether it's the will or the mind or the soul. Trying to connect with them and not talk about something that's not related to them. And then we talked about how to what extent do you go with shedding light? Do you step out your comfort zone? Do you go around, everybody, or do you just not? And I think the answer was, you go as far as someone's willing to listen. If someone's asking the right questions, or they're trying to understand, you shed that light. But if they're not willing, then that's just not a conversation they're ready for. And then we did have one question for George. Should we share that now or just after? Okay. With basically, evolution and that belief of the evolution that they teach in schools. So how do you have that conversation with someone that comes with that understanding, where science meets religion?
How to be concise with this? Well, if you ask me the question, do we believe in evolution? The response is yes. You just have to define what do you mean by evolution first. But do we believe in evolution within the same species, the same type? Yes, we do. This is a scientifically proven phenomena. We cannot deny it. But do you believe in macro evolution across type, across species, Darwinian evolution? No, we don't. This is not scientifically proven. It has not been scientifically proven. So you have to define first what you mean by evolution. It's a pretty loose term. There's theistic evolution, there's Darwinian evolution, there's microevolution, macroevolution, and all of that. But just to say a few words about evolution, evolution will answer two questions. God will answer another two questions. But the questions that Christianity or the scriptures will answer are far more essential. Evolution will answer the what and the how. God will answer the why and the who. Evolution cannot give you these two answers.
Thank you. Okay, we'll have this group. Who's talking?
Okay, well, when speaking with atheists, the important thing is to speak with meekness, kindness, and respect. A conversation happens with two people. It's not just one person speaking at them. So to like have that exchange, kind of be on the same playing field and the same respect. Some other questions that came up were, or that people have encountered when speaking with atheists is like, when you're speaking about the Trinity, for example, like, how do you believe in three gods? And then our response was kind of thinking of like the analogy of the sun was the best way of explaining that. Some other questions, how do you believe in the Bible when the Old Testament and the New Testament contradict each other? And then the last question is, why does God put people in the terrible situations or let them suffer if there was a God?
Can I just comment real quick on this? All these questions are answered in the book Timeless Truth and Truthless Times. So I'm not trying to dodge your question, but they're almost verbatim. The book outside has 35 questions and 35 answers, and most of them are also philosophical. So get a copy of the book.
All right, third group.
So in our group, we had a few conversations about how we've interacted with atheists through our daily lives and what we've encountered on what their arguments would be. And so the two main arguments that came up were, if they've had, again, these traumas in their lives, how do you respond to that? And as well, on the other point, like on the political side, right? There are these kind of pushes and agendas by other groups on how, like, for teaching, and how do we respond to that? How do we show our love and that we do, like, we hate the sin, not the sinner, but also not get drowned out by, like, stand up for our beliefs at the same time.
Yeah, the first, if you didn't finish your question, I would have probably finished it for you.
Yeah.
Problem of evil and suffering. Yeah. This is, I read 30 questions that were submitted from you all. Sorry, I'm giving you my back. And most of them, why is God allowing evil and suffering? Where is God in my misery? Why do I suffer? It seems like it's the overarching theme of the questions. Scholars call the problem of suffering the rock of atheism. So maybe, David, maybe next year, God willing, we'll just do a conference on the problem of evil and suffering, just to focus on that subject. And then we'll dissect it into pieces. The second question is the agenda of, I'm assuming you're talking about the LGBTQ and so on and so forth. And one of the questions, again, why do Christians hate LGBTQ people? Who says we do? As a matter of fact, we should show them more love than not. But we don't agree with what they do. And we have to differentiate between these two things. Christ gave us the perfect example when he talked to the Samaritan woman, when he talked to Zacchaeus, when he talked to Nicodemus. All his encounters, Belash Nicodemus, the Zacchaeus and the Samaritan woman, he loved them but did not agree with what they were doing. So that's our approach. But the problem of evil and suffering, I suggest that we can make something that is just focused on that.
And Dave has the last group. Perfect. Oh, you need a mic? Swap.
So some of the points that we came up with was not to focus on the peripherals, but to, without knowing the principles of Christianity first, and that it takes a lot of faith to be an atheist too. And the boys here also mentioned some of the things they learned was like the human body and how perfect creation is also proof of God's existence. We also had a question that came up about the verse that you shared, the Bible verse which says, light has come into the world, but people left darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. And in terms of like not believing in God, it feels like we naturally have evil deeds, and we're always trying to fight the evil inside of us to believe in God. So are we naturally evil? And
no. No, but we live in a fallen world. God created everything good, and when he created man, he didn't say it was good. He said it was what? Who said that? Oh, sorry. Very good. He said very good. So God creates everything good. We are very good according to God. But what happened? We live in a fallen world. Doesn't mean that we're naturally evil. What it means to live in a fallen world, our inclinations became towards evil. And St. Paul, see, everything is in the scriptures explained. St. Paul explained it beautifully in Romans chapter 7. There is an old man and there's a new man. Wal-Litnin, there's like a fight between them. And he said, the good I want to do, I don't do. The bad I don't want to do, that I do. So there's some kind of war, contention between. So what do I do? With the Spirit, I can subdue the desires of evil, the desires of the flesh. And this is how I can become victorious. Do I do this on my own? No. I need to basically ask for God's grace to help me subdue the desires of the old man. So, but we're not naturally evil. That would be not an accurate statement. If you want to add anything.
I think we're good. So we'll take a break. Those of you who have had a little bit of a snack, we do have some more good food, and we might have a game or two as well. So we'll break just for about, I want to say 20 minutes, 25 minutes maximum. We'll have lunch. This is your opportunity on lunch, and then a game or two, and then we'll come back for the third session. Sounds good? Awesome.